We had a trailer that we put right there. You're seeing the razor wire that they had all around us. A lot of people want to know why we didn't come right out. Yeah, we had a barbed wire fence around us, for one thing. It's one of the reasons.
Well, that razor wire was worse than any barbed wire fence.
Oh, well, no.
I did not realize what razor wire was until I went back on Mount Carmel and saw it, and I thought, I could hardly believe that they'd use a thing like
this
that.
This is one of the buses that we had that was dragged down toward the lake, and about 8 months after the fire, somebody came and torched it. Both of the buses that we've had out there have been torched since April 19th, 93.
Well, the big bus was in perfect condition.
This is a lot of the concrete from the foundations of the building that the ATF and the ATF and the private contractors have scooped up. What you're seeing there, that hole in the ground, is the beginning of a tunnel that came out of the bus that was buried underground. That's the only tunnel in the whole place, in spite of all the stories you've heard. There was only one tunnel that led into our storm shelter that we were in the process of building. There were no tunnels that led away from the building. There was no possibility of anybody escaping through tunnels or anything like that.
They said we had tunnels running to the houses. There's no such thing. We didn't need tunnels. We were close to one another. The houses were close. They weren't far apart. And we were close
the white building you just saw used to be a dairy years ago, and more recently, just about the time of the raid, it was being used for working on cars. That's what's left of our swimming pool after they dumped a lot of concrete and burned lumber and stuff into it. That's another shot of the swimming pool, I believe.
Mm-hmm. We certainly enjoyed the swimming pool. The children loved it. They used to have great fun there.
That's me actually walking with Daniel Martin. He was with us at the time we were traveling around. Well, we dropped off over at your place that night.
You'll see it in a minute.
This is all even depressing to me, Clive and Catherine. I never even lived there.
Well, it's not just the building that's gone, but we had trees and a big playpen for the children.
I had a beautiful pecan tree that they knocked down in front of my house. There were formosa trees that they ripped out. They did not leave anything that had any beauty to it at all. They made it as desolate as they possibly could.
This actually looks quite green after several years of rain on it, but what it doesn't show is that all the topsoil was scraped away. The place looked like a desert with the tanks. So that's part of the underground bus, which they completely tore up and reburied. Mm-hmm. That was the entrance I mentioned into the tunnel. It came out of the front door of the bus, and then it went into the storm shelter.
Mm-hmm.
A beautiful skyline.
That's one thing Mount Carmel was famous for, was its sunsets.
It was a beautiful area, especially when we had the horses and the cow, and
There's another motorcycle.
and they would be grazing in the field.
This sign was put up by somebody else. Doesn't belong to any of our people at all.
What about
same with that? Well.
That wasn't put up by you?
No.
Okay.
It was all...
We did not put any of that up.
The only things that we've put up since the fire have been, we've planted a tree for each one that died, and we've put a stone in front of each tree. All these other things, asking for donations and supposedly telling you what went on, is all the imagination of other people. So a lot of it, Amo Roden and several others. This was the bus that the media hid behind during the shootout, but of course it was later pushed back there by the tank, and it's been burned and gutted and everything.
That's right.
Some of the
they ruined everything.
Bicycles and things that were run over by tanks. We had go-karts for the children. We had motorcycles and bicycles, and and they just tore everything up.
You know, when the children saw them running over their bicycles and go-karts and things, they were so upset because they didn't understand why they were doing it. To tell you the truth, even the adults couldn't understand why they were doing it, because it was just sheer malice, sheer hate. And it's a shame to live with that in your life.
I might comment on the flag. A lot of people have commented, how come you had an Israeli flag flying from the flagpole? That is not an Israeli flag.
No.
What that is a six-pointed flying seraph or serpent, as it's described in Isaiah chapter 6.
The amazing thing about that flag was the place burnt for a long time, and the flames were nowhere near the flag, when all of a sudden, if you're watching it at a particular time, the flag sort of left the flagpole and took off like a bird and went right into the fire. Disappeared.
There.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, well, go ahead. Yeah, go
He's
ahead.
another squatter.
Yeah, I knew that. I knew that.
He's another person that's trying to get some money from our problems and disaster, you know.
Everybody's getting rich off of this except
But
us.
we don't get one. We haven't got a dime from this thing. And not that I want to make any money on it. But the thing is that, you know, it's been very hard for many of the people that came out of there. And all they're living on is
Pensions.
Yeah, pensions, Social Security, you know, that sort of thing. They don't give you much to do that.
Well, yeah, let's face it. You had your house destroyed.
You bet.
Virtually paid off 77
And we had our
acres.
family.
Family, and then you just the so-called government that was doing it for the children went in there and destroyed your all's home, and then
Yeah, they were
then
saving
they buried
them.
up the evidence.
They saved them with the CS gas. You know,
Yeah, saved
they
them
wanted
with
to make sure that they took care of them, and they took care of them all right. And they took care of everybody else there.
Let's go ahead and try another call here, and then we'll.
There's one thing, though, I'd like to inject. That many of the people that were there fighting us were very ignorant of what they were doing. It's the people that were running the place.
You mean the VATF, the actual foot soldiers?
A lot of them were new.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what was going on. They'd been trained to do a certain thing, and so they did it because they thought they had to do it.
And they were on the payroll.
Well, yes, but
Yeah.
you see, it's just like somebody is told something, and they don't know what the law is. They can be told it, and then they feel they have to do it. And the thing is, they don't have to do it.
I agree.
But you see, these people,
We're gonna
these
get into
young
those. We're
people
gonna get
that
into some
were
of that a
put
little bit
in,
later.
you know, they didn't know what they were doing. But the ones that got up there and spouted all these lies, absolute lies, and they knew they were lies, they're the ones that are more responsible. They're the ones that God looks down at and is disgusted with, and going to give them a second double portion.
Let me go ahead and read it, Kathy. Let's see. Do we want to do it like this, or?
Well, and then we'll go to call.
Okay, let's go ahead. Okay, tell us about the concrete room that the children were in for safekeeping,
The women
and
were there.
tanks went smashing into the walls, collapsing it on the children. Was that how the children were killed?
In this market, yeah, follow-up.
The follow-up is, are you inserting gas into the bunker, into the school bus, into the underground areas where you expect them?
Question is, have we put in gas in the bunkers and in the school bus? Yes, we did. What we tried to do was deprive them of the use of that as a means of escape away from the building. Yes, sir.
What's the status of Vernon Howell's Camaro?
His Camaro, with all 427 cubic inches, is still in good shape. He was very concerned about that yesterday. In fact, that was probably the most violent that he's acted in the 52 days. How many is it? 51, 52, 51 days that we've been here. But we treated it with care. Question is there a point where the gas builds up and does become lethal? Not in the dosage levels that we're using.
You just said all the adults have gas masks, but
the question is, what is the status of the children? We do not know if they have gas masks as well. But we have gone to extraordinary steps to ensure that the dosages being utilized are well below the medium lethal ranges. That the dosages being utilized are well below the medium lethal ranges of CS gas. We would not use dosages that would harm those children, nor would those dosages cause damages to their lungs or other types of injuries. There have been some unfortunate reporting talking about that if tear gas were utilized, it would deprive the children of oxygen and it perhaps could be fatal.
Crashing into the walls, collapsing it on the children. Was that how the children were killed?
Well, that's what Crow told me when we were, there was quite a few of us at the Brittany Hotel, and that's what he said. He said they poked the hole in the building and went into this building, cement building, that was very thick, that had been our refrigeration, where we had our refrigeration, and it knocked down the roof, part of the roof, which came down and hit the children and the women that were there. And he said a lot of them had been hurt by that and died from it.
Did you want to comment?
Well, that's one theory, that a tank caused the roof to cave in, but there's also another theory being put around, which I have no proof for at this point, but it's believed that charges were set and blew the hole in the roof and decapitated some of the people inside the room. It's definitely...
My question is, what are they doing driving tanks into the structure with men, women, and children on the other side? Now, we're going to get into that here as the show progresses, but you're on air.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I had a question. I know it's one little blurb that was on national TV, and it was about David was studying the seven seals, and they'd come up with some answers, and that's all I ever heard. I was wondering, did you all know anything about that?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, Davis gave us
Thanks
the seven seals. He instructed us of the seven seals. But the thing is that none of us can give the seven seals. We do not have the same spirit that he had.
David, over the negotiating phones, David had told the FBI negotiators that God had spoken to him and asked him, or given him the go-ahead, to write out a brief explanation of the seven seals, which the negotiators had sent in supplies so that he could go ahead and begin that project, and he did indeed get started on it the night before the gassing. They had told him he could have all the time he needed, and the very next day they started ramming the building with tanks, injecting gas, and so the project was never finished. We do have the portion that he did write. One of those women that survived the fire came away with a disc, computer disc, with the portion that he had gotten finished, and we'd be quite willing to send it to you if you want to contact us. We'll give you an address later on as to where you can write.
Do we have another call on hold, or has it been waiting for a while? Just a quick question or comment, because I want to get into the...
Hello?
Hello, how you doing?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I wanted to call and thank Clive and Catherine for being on tonight. We really appreciate this. We knew from day one, our family, that ATF was responsible, number one, for this. Janet Reno, every one of them were behind this. And I wanted to thank them for being on tonight. I think for teaching the American people and coming out with the truth. More people need to know about it. You know, myself, my family, our friends, we all know this. We were devastated by it, and we didn't believe any of the lies that were being told to us on TV. And I just want to call and say thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for your support.
God bless you.
God bless you too.
Thank you.
Very glad to be here.
Before we take that break, though, I want to ask you all. I want to just get this in kind of quickly, if we could, because the last part of the show I want to get into. Like you said, you have current people now that are getting beaten in these prisons and stuff. So we want to get into some of the as far as what I would like to see done, as far as indictments for the tank drivers all the way up to the people that gave the orders, because these people are not being held accountable for what I consider to be murderous acts. But until that time, I want to just ask you about the 51 day. Okay, first off, just quickly, because this is the one question that everybody asks me, and I've even forgotten the good response. Why didn't you all come out?
First of all, there was a certain amount of trepidation when the ATF evacuated after the shootout. There's quite a bit of fear, you might say, on the part of the people that were in there, expecting them to perhaps wait till nightfall and come back in and attack us. Of course, you know that they were supposed to have been relieved of their part in this by the FBI by the end of that day. And from that point on, over the negotiation phones, we were being told that even though they wanted everybody to come out, they did not want us all just coming out in all directions, because they had the place surrounded. They had sniper nests all over the, in various localities, and they apparently had a hard time contacting these people. They weren't all hooked up by phones or whatever. And so if we would be setting ourselves up perhaps to be shot if we just all came out, and, as I say, out of any exit or at any given time. So I was given to understand that it all had to be set up over the phones.
Underneath the compound, but gas will permeate those areas as well. So again, we're not anticipating they're all going to flow out at any second right now, but it has been quite substantial. Yes, sir.
Are you surprised no one has left the compound after you've opened up the walls?
Question is, am I surprised? Truthfully, I'm not surprised. I think you have a totally fanatical, committed group to David Koresh. We believe that there's a hardcore group. They're all heavily armed. They're all firing at our vehicles when they do appear. Those who are weak, we believe that they're surrounded with firearms and probably are not being allowed to leave. Those who are totally loyal to Koresh, it's going to have to require extreme discomfort, we believe, and probably a signal from Mr. Koresh that now's the time to get out of here. Yes, time to get out of here. Yes.
Can you show us where on the map you inserted the gap?
Well, I can't show you all because we have virtually surrounded this.
Over the negotiation phones, we were being told that even though they wanted everybody to come out, they did not want us all just coming out in all directions, because they had the place surrounded. They had sniper nests all over the, in various localities, and they apparently had a hard time contacting these people. They weren't all hooked up by phones or whatever. And so if we would be setting ourselves up perhaps to be shot if we just all came out, and, as I say, out of any exit or at any given time. So I was given to understand that it all had to be set up over the phones. And for several weeks, people were coming out on a regular basis. There was over 30 people came out of there as a result of the negotiations that were going on and being set up. Me personally, I felt that the women and children would be first, maybe the elderly, and that perhaps the guys would be the last one. So I was quite prepared to stay until my turn came, you might say. Everybody I know that was in there had their bags packed. We were fully expecting to come out. As a result of the treachery on the part of the team, the FBI team that were on the ground, the tactical team, it seemed like every time somebody came out or every time we complied with what they asked us to do, we would be punished in some way. They would destroy something, they would threaten, and they cut off our electricity. They were playing all this music and the bright lights and so forth. Everything that seemed to be done negative when we complied with what they wanted. So there came a point where everybody just basically said, forget it. We either all come out together or not at all, sort of thing. And it was kind of a standoff. That's the feeling on the part of the people as individuals. On the other hand, we also had a religious situation that a lot of people don't understand, and that is that God had told David to wait. They had not complied with his request to play the tape that Catherine brought out in prime time. That was the agreement. They didn't play it in prime time. Probably very few people in this country heard it at all. And so God told David to wait. And we waited, as I say, partly for an indication or some kind of sign from God or a green light. And that green light, I believe, came when David was instructed by God to begin writing the 7 seals. But the FBI were impatient, and on April 19th, of course, they overrode the negotiators who were telling him to take his time and write this out, and then everybody would come out. They just decided to come in with the gas and demolish the building. And I don't know whether you got the footage tonight, but there's one footage where it says that their aim was to isolate us all in pockets, and by the end of the morning they'd pretty well done that. Those of us that were in the chapel were not able to get down to those that were in the kitchen area, and the ones upstairs were pretty well blocked off from getting up and downstairs because they were demolished by the tanks and so forth. So there's probably a lot of people that would have liked to have got out of the fire once the fire started that were unable to. We know for a fact that there were people that came out on the offside from the cameras where the media were not available to take pictures, who were shot.
As they were trying to escape.
As they were trying to come out.
So the bottom line is you really didn't trust this
We didn't trust the government.
Yeah,
they hadn't given us any reason to trust them.
Right.
That kind of an incident. I understand that. I wanted to ask Mr. Jamara, I'm actually confused, and I don't have a firm opinion. I want to get a clarification. In the tapes on March 4th, it's been alleged that David Koresh was the person who initially called about the milk, or did the FBI suggest the milk? Did David Koresh ask for milk? The report here says the FBI offered milk in return. Did Koresh initiate the milk request?
I think so, yes.
And was this on the tapes, let's get her, that's Heather Jones, out, and then we'll send you the milk?
I'm sorry, would you repeat? There was noise behind me. I couldn't hear you.
Let's get her out, and then let me send you the milk. In other words, the core question here is that the FBI offered milk in return for the release of some children.
Right.
Yesterday we heard that Koresh believed that the promise was violated because that the tapes suggest that there is the phrase, now it may be other phrases in it too, let's get her out and then let me send you the milk.
Well, that was an effort to, this is, remember, March 4th. It's an effort to establish a quid pro quo and an exchange here.
And the next day she came out, Heather Jones.
It was an effort to get that done. She did come out, but that exchange was an effort by the negotiator to establish that type of relationship and to communicate with force.
So do you believe that then not sending the milk after she came out the next day gave Koresh some reason to doubt whether or not you were going to follow through on the negotiated deal? You don't believe that was a negotiated deal? Send her out and we'll send you milk?
I don't think it was at all. He chose to let her go for his reasons. He never involved himself in the quid pro quo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been engaged over several days, as I think you all can tell, asking a series of what I think are very insightful questions and receiving a lot of information. Lest you leave from here with the impression that everybody on that side of the aisle is just can't say enough nice things about you and we're all the bad guys. Specifically, the gentleman from Michigan previously praised you, and I'm sure he was sincere in that. But just 2 years ago in testimony and when these hearings were held, he called what you did a disgrace. So there's more than meets the ear in these things. What we're trying to do, certainly over here, is ask some questions to avoid these problems coming up in the future, and I would certainly hope that you all would share in that. Mr. Kavanaugh, I have in my hand here a amount of Play-Doh. Mr. Bush, if you could, this is just standard Play-Doh. If that were a flashbang grenade or a stun grenade, the same thing, which was live, which pin had been pulled, would you feel comfortable just holding that in your hand?
Well, Mr. Barr, a flashbang grenade ejects a cardboard tube out the bottom, so if you knew, you could probably have it hold it in a proper way to have it eject. A flashbang grenade, my answer is no. I would not want to hold it, but a flashbang grenade is no fragmentation at all.
No, I know that, and don't anticipate where I'm going with it. I don't mean for you to be defensive. There's no reason to. Earlier today, there was testimony from Mr. Schumer that these are not devices that can harm somebody, and in fact, they can, can't they?
Well, there is no fragmentation. There is concussion and a blast.
Is a flashbang the same as a stun grenade?
Stun grenade, yes, sir.
Okay. Those are classified as destructive devices under 26 U.S.C. Section 5845F, aren't they?
Yes, sir, they are.
And as a matter of fact, the ATF in court takes a position in convicting people that possess these devices that they are destructive devices. Is that true?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
That they can kill people. Is that true?
I think it would be, you'd have to hold it close to your body, but it's possible, certainly, yes, sir.
Well, a gentleman by the name of Warren L. Parker, an explosives enforcement officer, Bureau of ATF, on May 11, 1994, in court, said under oath that they are designed to help kill the suspect while not endangering the law enforcement officer when they're used for those purposes. But anyway, again, I'm not being critical of you or anything. I think that there were some mischaracterizations deliberately this morning that I wanted to clear up with regard to these. The question that I have relates to what appear to be some very serious miscalculations on the part of law enforcement officials trying to gauge the response of the people inside the facility there. Both at the beginning of this, we had agents testify that despite the fact that the folks on the inside knew what was coming, they had amassed large numbers of weapons, which is obvious from looking at the questions and hearing y'all's testimony. The agents said they were stunned. They were surprised at what happened. And then on the other end, what we're talking about right now, going in with I guess what you all consider somewhat more benign activities, such as the introduction of the tear gas, some surprise on the part of the firing that came out of there and so forth. And the question, I have here an autopsy photo, and I'm not going to introduce it because it's rather gross. And it's very sad. It's a photograph of a one-year-old child, and it's been burned. And right in the middle of the remains is a ferret round. Right smack in the middle of the remains of this one-year-old child is a ferret round with the CS gas. I find it hard to follow y'all's thinking if the activities on April 19th were considered to be benign. They caused a lot of deaths. We may never know exactly who died. A lot of the autopsies reveal that people died from suffocation and debris falling on them, and we may never know how much of that was caused from the walls caving in when the tanks came in and so forth, or how many others might have died from the ferret rounds coming in. Do y'all feel, and again, I don't mean to be critical, but I think there were some bad misgauging of responses on the other side. Do you all recognize that in hindsight, certainly, which is what we're all operating under here, that there were miscalculations with regard to how these folks in there would respond to what they, I think, correctly identified as aggressive moves? And I'm not saying the aggressive moves were necessarily unjustified. Is that of concern to you all as you kind of look back on this whole process? Mr. Jamar?
I think the inability to get people to come out of there with some gas was a surprise to us. The fact that it made the way the course was able to control those people such that they didn't get out, and the fact that they end up all dying in I consider murder-suicide. I think there were 17 who were shot in there. When that was and how they were shot, I don't know. I think you're saying here's a ferret round lying in the remains of a one-year-old child, and then concluding that child died from that ferret round is I think, contrary to the autopsy, I would think.
Anybody that got this gas on their skin was in terrible pain. A lot of the guys were screaming, if they got it on their skin. And
let me insert this. They found one baby that had a ferret in their body. If it hit you, it could kill you.
one of the adults, I understand, I didn't see it, but I was told that one of the adults who did happen to have a gas mask on was hit full in the face with one of them, and it knocked him off his feet onto the floor. It didn't injure him too badly, but there was enough force in it to knock him off his feet. Just one little add to the question about why we didn't come out, and that is, for about a week before April 19th, anybody that did come out, for whatever reason, even on official business, such as Steve Snyder coming to receive something that the FBI was sending in, we were having these flashbang grenades lobbed at us and thrown at us all that week prior to the fire. So you say, why didn't we come out? We never knew what to expect, and even after the fire started, those of us that were in the chapel, I remember somebody running in saying the building's on fire, and our immediate reaction was to move away from the front of the building because, we had this feeling it was upstairs and in the front somewhere. We couldn't see it. There was no evidence of it at the time, but we moved away from that area and went up on the stage that was in the church and round behind a petition that had been built across the stage. And there was a tank hole on the south side of the building, and David Thibodeau and I stood there going, well, what should we do? Should we jump out? Will they shoot us? I mean, we could see tanks, we could see guys outside the tanks with guns trained on us, we could see the sniper nest. We were a little unsure as just to what would happen, and just within a few seconds it seemed like the smoke came down the outside of the building, was sucked into the hole that we were looking out of, and just filled the room with smoke. And real quick after that, I mean, you couldn't see a thing, you could hardly breathe, and the next thing, all you could feel was this tremendous heat over our heads, and seemed like on both sides, almost like you were surrounded. And just about everybody I could sense around me seemed to be rolling on the floor, and I could hear them screaming and so forth. I was rolling on the floor and screaming. I was trying to protect my hands from the heat because I didn't have any gloves on.
I could see we've done. You can see your skin dress.
I had to spend 3 weeks in the burn ward in Dallas.
And just according to some of the videos that I've seen, that's just you were there, but it seemed like some of these FBI people were just walking around there. It wasn't like they were trying to rescue anybody or anything like this.
To the media, they told the media early in the day that the reason they changed their plans, I know they brought this up in court when we were on trial, but they were supposed to, they had 2 tanks loaded with these cylinders of gas, and they were both supposed to empty them for 2 rounds. In other words, they'd make a trip, empty it all, go back, reload, come back and insert it again off of the booms, spray it into the building. And then if we hadn't come out by then, they were supposed to go to the ferret rounds, but they started with the ferret rounds almost immediately, and their excuse was that we were supposed to be firing at the tanks, which I could swear on a stack of Bibles that I heard absolutely no shooting by anybody from within, although with all the timbers cracking and the building being demolished around your ears, and the noise of the tank motors and the ferret rounds, which kind of sound like mortars going off, it might have been a bit hard to hear anything. Somebody said, well, have you been able to hear the shots that the FBI were shooting into the building at the back? And I says, I couldn't even tell you I could identify them per se, but they show up on film, you see. But anyway, there's all this noise and so forth. It's just tremendous pressure. And when I finally did come out, I thought I was the only one because I hadn't seen anybody leave.
How did you get out? You found a little opening somewhere?
I dived toward the hole, where I'd last seen the hole. I couldn't see it at the time, but I just lunged in that general direction, kind of slithered out over this big heap of sheetrock and 2x4s and stuff that the tank had pushed in. And it wasn't until later, of course, I found out that 3 others had gone out that same hole ahead of me, but I hadn't seen them. It was so pitch black, and I hadn't seen anybody leave. And
what happened to you when you got out?
Well, when I first got out, I thought, my God, I'm the only one, and I looked back over my shoulder, and the hole that I'd come out of was just a mass of flames, and I thought, nobody's going to come out of there now. And I thought, I've got to get away from the building. So I staggered away from the building and ran slap bang into this razor wire fence. And that kind of pulled me up with a jerk, and I looked up. I looked both ways, actually, see what should I do now. And I could see some of our guys that I recognized as our guys walking up toward the front gate with their hands up. So I figured, well, I'll just follow them, you know. And so as I went to follow them, one of the FBI agents that was outside of the tank started screaming at me to come over to him. Kept threatening to blow my head off if I made a false move and all this kind of stuff. And I went over there and he's screaming at me, "Where are the kids? Where are the kids?" I said, "I don't know where the children are. I haven't seen them all day, you know." And so he was kind of mad about that and told me to get on up to near the front gate area where they were arresting everybody that did come out, everybody that survived, I should say. And by the time I got up there, there was 4 people down on the ground, face down, handcuffed. I went up there. The skin was just rolling off my hands, but they went ahead and handcuffed my hands behind my back. And shortly after that, they brought Ruth Riddle, who jumped out of one of the windows on the 2nd floor, broken her ankle. She had burns on her knees and everything. They brought her up and put her on the ground beside me and handcuffed her. And then they just started screaming at her because they wanted her to tell them her name. And she was in such shock and pain that she didn't answer them. And so one of them just reached down and started jerking her head around by the hair. You know, just got a big handful of hair and was just jerking her head back and forth. And I could hear some guy off to the right of me saying, "You better not do that. They're taking pictures," you know. And so he let her go. And so, you know, we just spent the next year in jail after 3 weeks in hospital.
Okay, Clive, we're gonna still got an hour and a half to go here, but we got some things that they're telling us we have to do. That was a quick call. You're on the air. Hello. You're on the air.
Hello, me?
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I'm really touched by what you're saying, and I want to say simply that I've been in a similar situation in a community in Oregon where the National Guard was up the road, and I'm touched by the tremendous innocence that I recall from our situation, and it's just such misrepresentation. And I just plead with everybody who's watching this, however cynical you are, just take a real good look at these people. They're genuine, you know. Look at their faces. Their eyes are telling the truth. And how the hell do we get to the point where we so misunderstand, believe the media, and judge without knowing what's really going down? And I'm so grateful to both of you coming on the show. And I hope people will really meditate and reflect on what's going on tonight, because we've all got to make some very deep changes in how we're living.
All right, thanks for your call, caller.
Usually you have to go through something before you wake up just how much you have been lied to by the media and the government.
See, my opinion is that there should have been a tremendous outrage at what happened at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, 6 months.
Nobody ever heard about it until later, you know.
So if the American people would have had the moral courage to stand up to a 14-year-old kid getting shot in the back, then maybe
well, there were some
Waco wouldn't have.
Some that were very happy in Waco that it was happening to us. They knew nothing about us, but they were in a bar, and they were just saying, they were hooray, they were exuberant because of it. And you know, everybody else, you know, this is supposed to be a city of Baptist oriented people who are supposed to know the scriptures, who are supposed to know, you know, to say, I've got Jesus in my heart. Well, we didn't see it. We didn't see anything that indicated there was a Christian around. Nobody stood up. In the city I'm talking about. Now, there are people that came from other places that were trying to stand up, and they were being pushed back. But if there had been enough people there, just like Ruby Ridge, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened. They would have had to let us come out and at least have a trial, at least try to bring the truth to the front.
Well, we've approached quite a number of different organizations after we got out of jail, for instance, to see what their attitude was and if they could offer any help and everything. Amnesty International, Red Cross, Salvation Army, all these people turned us down, basically. And you go, this is almost unbelievable. The excuse is, well, you had guns, and they'd help anybody else, whether they had guns or not. But for some reason, I guess, God allowed it to be. So we don't hold it against them. But it just seems strange to me that so many organizations that are supposed to be dedicated to helping
human rights and
the oppressed and the persecuted and the tormented and everything turn their back on.
I think that's just an indication, Clive, that the whole world is just completely controlled by wicked forces that are in control of virtually anything of any significance.
It's real, but he wouldn't be surprised.
And this particular group also believed that something was going to happen. I mean, it seems like they were on the same philosophical beliefs.
Well, Mary, all of the mainstream churches, if they study prophecy and if they study Revelation, God, we know something's going to happen. But the world is so worldly and materialistic and caught up in everyday things, TV, movies, clothes, eating, this and that. They don't study the Scriptures. God says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. So you get these people that are really mainstream studying the Scriptures. They know what's going to happen. So these people died a terrible death. They're martyrs. Didn't all of Christ's disciples die a terrible death? They were tarred and feathered, their heads were chopped off. Did that make them any less God's people? David and all the kids died a terrible death. And my hope is that the kids didn't suffer too much, but they were still doing God's work. So I think David's watching what's happening.
And to know that there are families out there that, 1 in a million shot are feeling the devastation that you have felt. Does it make you want to reach out to them?
Yes, I wish I could just speak to every one of them and hug them and comfort them. But, unless you walk in somebody else's shoes and you experience a lot of these things, you don't realize the depth of hurt and anguish and wondering why. I know we have our belief in God and all that, but still you wonder, why does this happen and why did it happen? And I know them families are asking the same questions. There's, I believe, a mayor or someone from Canada had went. Him and his wife were evidently members. And a lot of people are shocked. I mean, you're shocked. I was in shock for months after all that happened.
What answers could you give them, Barney? Why? If they were to say to me, why did this happen, how would you comfort them?
I wouldn't know how. I wouldn't know how. All I could say is I understand, and, there's so many answers still every day. I mean, I have my faith in God that sustains me and keeps me positive, but then there's a little times when I, humanly speaking, I say, why did it have to happen? And go through, why does it happen again? And hopefully it won't happen again. But I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Is there any message that you have maybe for people that are watching this who have gone through this tragedy, or people that you might believe that might be watching this that may be a part of some so-called conspiracy, as you call it? Any message you'd like to give anybody out there watching?
Only thing I can say is people be aware of what's going on, who's running the things. Be aware, get off our butts and be aware of what's going on in the world. I don't know if there's any way to prevent this kind of stuff, but we need to be aware. Study the prophecies, study the Scriptures, find out what's going on in the world as a whole, the governments, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not real smart on all this, but I just do know there's something going on that we can't control. It's scary. It scares crap. It's really scary. But I'm helpless to do anything about it, except that I am aware of what's going on. So I just have to put it in God's hands and trust Him to take care of everything.
If it's in God's hands, why is it even happening? why now are 28 more people dead?
Well, there's people die every day from other reasons. Look over in all over the world, Africa and Haiti and all these places. Why are people dying? This is the devil's world. I mean, you know, he's controlling it. God's allowing these things to happen. But, I mean, things happening all over the world. Children starving to death and people dying of diseases and people killing one another. And the same thing with David. David then had some guns. It was a business. They did not hurt anybody. They weren't out to hurt anybody, let alone themselves.
Anything? I want to answer a couple more here.
Go ahead.
Okay. What makes you think, Bonnie, that this is a conspiracy?
Well, you know, studying prophecies and books I've read and things that's going on in the world, the New World Order, and there's a lot of books out on exactly what's happening today. There's one called The Committee of 300. Everybody ought to read. The world is so worldly and materialistic and caught up in everyday things, TV, movies, clothes, eating, this and that. They don't study the scriptures. God says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. So you get these people that are really mainstream.
The Associated Press story chronicles how outraged these jurors were by the government's own testimony about what happened at Waco to the Branch Davidians. Now understand, this is after the trial is over. The newspaper establishment, in this particular story, it's the Associated Press, is asking the jurors, what did they think? What comments do they have? They were just fit to be tied. It turns out that those tanks that we watched on the day of the assault, the final assault when there was the big fire and everything, those tanks that we watched on television were not just poking holes in the wall to insert gas into the structure. This is a residence that's occupied by men, women, and children, yet those tanks that we saw, according to this trial testimony, the government's testimony, those tanks were ordered to penetrate this residence occupied by men, women, and children. The government's strategy as described at the trial by the government itself was to bring this structure down. This is a residence occupied by men, women, and children. Our government, that is supposed to be based on the ideals of freedom and liberty, justice for all, our government instructed its government agents to climb into tanks and roll those tanks right into a structure that's occupied with men, women, and children. And as a result, some of the children that we were told the government was saving died as the structure came down and crushed skulls. They died from blunt force trauma to their skulls. It's like this. For people who are wondering, how come there's a militia movement that's growing in this country? Well, it used to be, I'm over 50. I was 52, just had a birthday just here recently. And we used to use the phrase up in arms as sort of a metaphor. It was kind of a joking metaphor. People are up in arms about this or that. But when you have a government that orders its agents to get into tanks and run those tanks through a residence occupied by men, women, and children, and then there are no indictments. There's no indictment of the tank drivers. There's no indictment of the people who ordered the tank drivers. There's no indictment of any of the high officials. At that point, the truce has broken down, and the phrase "up in arms," the people are up in arms, is the only thing that's left for them as a reality, instead of it being a metaphor. So yeah, you have a growing militia movement because we now have a government that isn't technically violating the Constitution or technically creating injustices. We've got a government now that does it in a big way, does it on television, doesn't even get to sweep it under the rug, testifies at trial that what it did was order its agents to get into tanks and run the tanks through a residence occupied by men, women, and children. And there are no indictments of any of these people. At the very least, they should be indicted for manslaughter, if not murder. We haven't had that happen, and that's why you have a militia movement that's growing in this country. They see a government that may, depending on which aspect of the militia you ask, there's going to be different things that bother them, and maybe you won't agree with them on this issue or that issue. But the one point that we can all agree on is you cannot have a government that just arbitrarily kills people, runs tanks through houses, and not even have the agents who drove the tanks be indicted. You cannot have that. At that point, there is no more choice. You have to be up in arms. You have to be ready to deal with that government in the same way that it's dealing with their citizens. Now, I'm not advocating that we raise an army and go storm Washington, D.C. No, this is not a question of going in and invading. This is a question of people feeling the need to be ready to protect themselves with deadly force if they have to against a government that has gone outlaw. To the Branch Davidians, I would say you've been treated in a way that no human being should be treated, let alone people on American soil. This is an outrage. This cannot be allowed to stand. I am very pleased that Jeff Davis has been pursuing this issue in public access TV. This isn't an issue that's going to be pushed by the establishment media. This is Terry Liberty Parker, hardcore libertarian in Austin, Texas.
A Branch Davidian to join us. Clive, we're honored here to have your mother.
That's my mother.
Yeah, this is Clive Doyle's mother. And us and that know these people, we call her Grandma Edna. Grandma Edna, do you have any opening statements or comments you'd like to make to the viewers of the program tonight?
Well, I'm just hoping that the people of America will wake up to know that they've got a government that's running this country that's out to destroy those that don't go along with them. And what happened at Waco is not the last you've seen of it. It's going to continue on till God comes down and finishes the work himself.
So I want to just ask you all to comment on that. I would agree with everything she said there, that there is a government in place now that is out to destroy anybody that's righteous.
Haven't they proved it?
Yeah. Well, that's what the scriptures teach.
That's right.
There are powers that want to do away with God's people. They want to persecute, make war on them, and unfortunately the scripture predicts that they will overcome and kill them for a period of time until the judgment sits and God intervenes.
And then in the end we win, or the righteous people win.
It says that the kingdom will be given to the saints.
In fact, I heard you, my first introduction to you, Edna, was on a Day 51 video, and I think you were sitting there with probably Woody Kendrick or one of these people. Maybe I've got it confused now, but somebody asked one of the Davidians about, do you think Jesus is coming soon? And you said...
I was out in the front of the courthouse after the trial was over and Clive got out. And somebody was saying, do you think David will come back? And I said, yeah, the sooner the better.
Well,
and I'm still saying that. I'm still asking God, please hurry up and send David back and put an end to all this terrible violence and evil that's ruling this world. And nobody seems inclined to want to stop it. That's the pity of it all. People are just sitting back taking it. Who started the militia in this country? Bill Clinton, because he sits in a position where he brought about a position where people are afraid, so they take up arms for self-defense. Why shouldn't they? Who wants somebody bashing in their home and kicking things around and just stand up to it? No way. Not in my home anyway.
Grandma, do you have any thoughts about this? We hear rumors about this new world order that
Sure, there's a new world order. The devil's going to bring one in, which is is almost in existence now, and God's got one which is far better, and that's the one I'm waiting for. I don't want anything to do with Satan and the people that let him use them.
I agree. I think you did a fantastic job, Clive.
Opportunity to fulfill the long-held promise of a new world order where brutality will go unrewarded.
Just in case you don't remember, let me jog your memory. In a church they called the Waco compound back in April '93, 17 little children, all so helpless and so small, died a senseless death of gas and flames. How many